What is postpartum depression, and is there a difference between that and baby blues? Do I know if I have postpartum anxiety? Is this ever going to end? I was there too, and today we're talking about it. Your first time here, hello, my name is Chelsea. My husband Drew and I had our baby in the summer of 2022. We're new parents, but we've learned a lot along the way, and we're wanting to share all of that with you. Today we're in a different corner of Blair's room, a little bit cozier. I have a blanket and a cup of coffee because I just wanted to talk through my experience with postpartum anxiety and baby blues. I do just quickly want to say that I'm not a licensed counselor or a mental health counselor or anything like that. I'm not a doctor. I'm just sharing my experience and sharing some things that helped me. But if you do think that you're in a situation where you need help, I would highly recommend reaching out to a friend, a loved one, and getting on a phone call with your doctor right away. Before we move too much further into this conversation of what my experience was with baby blues and postpartum anxiety, I really feel like we need to properly define postpartum anxiety, baby blues, and postpartum depression. If you don't know, there's a lot of things that happen to a woman after she gives birth. She has a lot of hormones. You had a placenta, like an organ that you grew that's left your body. Your body is trying to rebalance everything from the past 10 months where it's created a life to your body that it is after having a baby. Because all those hormones are going crazy trying to balance out, it leads to some crazy emotions that you can experience that are purely things that are happening due to the science of what's happening in your body, coupled along with probably sleep depression and a little bit of stress from having to take care of a new child. There's varying degrees to which we feel these emotions, and it's really important to understand the definition so you can understand what you need to do if you are in one of these boats feeling a certain way. You need to be able to clearly identify what is going on, get the best solution. I would highly suggest to do your own research on this. I'm just going to share a little bit of definition so we're all on the same page, but the Cleveland Clinic defines postpartum anxiety as severe anxiety after having a baby. I mean, it can't be more straightforward than that. Part of their definition says it's postpartum anxiety is where anxious thoughts and feelings are often out of control and take over your thoughts. But also according to Cleveland Clinic, that is different than postpartum depression. So postpartum depression can take on a variety of forms, but the two that we're going to talk about are baby blues and actual postpartum depression. Baby blues are described as frequent bouts of crying for no apparent reason, sadness, and anxiety. The Cleveland Clinic says that 50 to 75% of women will experience baby blues after delivery. The baby blues usually start the first week after you've had your child. Usually it's a couple days, and they can go up until a full 6 weeks postpartum. It's probably a very normal response to having a child. I don't think I was really prepared to go through the anxiety and the stress and the pressure that it is to take care of a life, and for me that was what contributed to my experience with baby blues. But postpartum depression is a little bit different, and it is more serious. 1 in 7 women typically experience postpartum depression. Postpartum depression, according to the Cleveland Clinic, is exhibited by alternating highs and lows, frequent crying, irritability, and fatigue. There's feelings of guilt, anxiety, and even feeling like you don't have the ability to take care of your child. Now, symptoms of postpartum depression can occur like a week after delivery, or they can occur up until a year after your child has been born. So there's a whole wide range of when you can have a postpartum depression. Now, a lot of those symptoms that I just described for anxiety and depression sounded really similar, but postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression are not the same thing. While they share similar symptoms, they're both actually rooted in really different issues. Postpartum anxiety is rooted in worry, whereas postpartum depression is rooted in sadness. And those are really the two base emotions that can help you differentiate if you're experiencing anxiety or depression. For me personally, I really do believe that I experienced the baby blues with a combination of postpartum anxiety. And one of the main reasons why I'm making this video is because I didn't even know that postpartum anxiety really was a thing until I began to search and kind of Google and go through and label my symptoms and what I was experiencing. On the Cleveland Clinic website, you can look this up. They have different symptoms for postpartum anxiety and depression. And I'm just going to go through some of the symptoms that I shared and share a little bit about what I felt during those times. So one of the most prominent things that helped me identify that what was going on with me was rooted in anxiety and not depression was this first symptom of racing thoughts. On the website, it says racing thoughts, especially about worst case scenarios. And for me, this was so true. I remember specifically Drew and I went to this mall in a city about 45 minutes away from us, and we just wanted to get out of the house extra long that day. I decided walking around a mall would be nice because we had our baby in summer and we live in Florida, so it's hot. I wanted to walk for an extended period of time just to help with my postpartum healing, which I talk all about in a previous video. Go check, you can check that out later. But we decided to go to the mall, and we had our daughter in her stroller, but she was still like a newborn. And I was like, let's get her out of her car seat and hold her. And so Drew was holding her, walking around the mall. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, she's gonna drop her on this tile, because like the floor of the mall was tile. And I literally just like had this thought of like my baby falling out of his hands, hitting the floor, and like her head just gone, like blood everywhere. Like it was just like a terrible, like a literally terrible thought, and it just started to consume me. I had this fear. Then he was like wanting to be playful with her, and it wasn't exciting for me, and I was just so worried about her falling and hitting her head on the tile floor. While I do think there's a part of every parent that has a radar to acknowledge potentially dangerous situations, I was having really invasive thoughts that were saying, oh, this could be a dangerous situation, and my brain was just playing it all the way through. The second symptom really relates to this, but the Cleveland Clinic also says a symptom of postpartum anxiety is obsessing over irrational fears or things that are most likely not going to happen. So this actually just happened quite recently. I'm 6 months postpartum, but I'm still struggling with the anxiety part a little bit, not to the extreme that I was when my baby was first born. But we were at IKEA, and I remember just walking down, pushing my girl in the stroller, and there were these like, you know, in IKEA at the end, if you've ever been, there's like the huge shelves. They're like so sky high, just full of product. And I had this thought of like, oh my gosh, they're gonna collapse on me, and like I can't save my child. Like I can't save her if that was to fall. And like I literally said out loud to Drew, I was like, hey, I have a fear right now that this warehouse is gonna fall in while we're walking down this aisle, and I'm not gonna be able to protect Blair. And he just looked at me, he was like, okay. And it was an irrational fear. Like, why was I fearing that? Like, that's never happened. It's not gonna happen. But I was so nervous and so anxious just thinking about it. Another symptom that I experienced was avoiding certain activities, places, or people. For the first, I feel like it was 6 weeks. For the first 6 weeks of Blair's life, I did not want to leave our house. Now, I was exclusively and still exclusively pumping, and on top of having to make sure your baby is eating every 2 hours, pumping to keep up with that, making sure they're sleeping, diaper changes, all of that, I felt like my life was on too rigid of a schedule to where I didn't have the flexibility to leave. That's not true, but I was obsessing over schedules. I was obsessing over her, tracking her feeds. I was obsessing over tracking my pumps, and it created an unhealthy mind for me. I didn't want to leave because, well, if I leave, then I have to pump at this time, then she has to be fed at this time, then I have to wash the pumps, then I have to do this. I never had time to leave, and I never wanted to go anywhere because I was afraid I was going to miss one of those things. I feel like there were 2 solid weeks where I just didn't want to leave the house. Now, my husband helped me, and my mom helped me, and my sister helped me. It was a really rough time, and I had to learn how to lean on people, but I just didn't want to. Another symptom the Cleveland Clinic defines postpartum anxiety with is checking things over and over again. Now, I had a really bad experience at my first pediatrician appointment. Mind you, I was coming out of an emergency C-section. I was finally home. We had been home for 24 hours. I obviously hadn't slept. I'm adapting to like a new life with a baby next to me. That night I didn't sleep because I had the irrational thought of, if she stops breathing, I'm not gonna know, because for some ungodly reason, when a mom delivers a baby, Instagram and TikTok just put these terrible ads on your phone about SIDS and all of this terrible stuff. So I had all of these images in my mind and was so worried that my daughter was going to wake up not breathing, that I obviously wasn't sleeping because I wanted to check on her. And like first 24 hours home was really terrible because of my anxiety. This led into the pediatrician appointment. I went there, and the pediatrician honestly was just very insensitive. My dad's a doctor, and I think he has a really good bedside manner, and I just feel like if you're going to be a doctor and talk to someone about their health, and especially the health of a child, like, you should just be kind. This woman was not kind, and she just grilled us with questions and made us feel like idiots if we didn't know the answer, or if our answer wasn't exactly what they wanted to hear. I just remember sitting there thinking, ma'am, I'm having to keep track of when my baby's eating, when I'm pumping, I'm having to change like how often I'm changing my pad, having to make sure my incision isn't opening. I'm like, I have all these other thoughts running through my head I don't know if my daughter has had 6 or 7 wet diapers. Like, I just remember thinking the stuff they were asking us was so extreme. Then she started asking us how much we were feeding our daughter and the different, amounts that she was taking. And if you didn't know this, a baby will first eat 5 ml in milliliters when they're first born. That's like the most that their stomach can take. And then within a week, they're supposed to be eating up to 20. If you're breastfeeding, don't really worry about that. But if you're bottle feeding and pumping like I was, you have to know those things. I wasn't fully aware of all of this stuff going on. I was just literally trying to survive. I just remember the pediatrician made me feel so bad about not knowing all of this information ahead of time or what was to be coming up with my daughter. And it caused a really unhealthy habit in me to obsess over tracking her feeds. I still struggle with this a little bit, but mostly I'm really persistent on tracking her feeds because I want to know what's going on. I feel like I can predict her needs better if I know the last time she slept and the last time she ate. I'm gonna know it's coming up, so if she's crying, I can easily solve it. But at the very beginning, I had this unhealthy obsession of tracking her feeds, and I would get really upset if someone fed her and didn't tell me or they didn't track it. And I have a Nara Baby app. I absolutely love it. It's a great app if you just want to use it, but it was definitely something that I obsessed over, and it really was, I think, attributed to the anxiety, the postpartum anxiety that I was feeling. Really, the last symptom that I super identify with postpartum anxiety is this feeling of being controlling. Being controlling is in my nature. So adding a baby onto that you love, adding the anxiety of everything that I was feeling, the way the doctor spoke to me, I felt like I just had to do everything. I had to wash her bottles, I had to clean the pump parts, I had to feed her, I had to change her diaper. Like, I feel like I had to do it all, so I knew that it was done right, and it was so silly. So I was super controlling over a lot of things and didn't release a lot of things at first, which just made everything worse because I was more stressed, I was more tired, I was carrying like too much of a load. And so the first few weeks, honestly, for me were really rough. I didn't want to leave our house. I was really mentally struggling. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it. There were women in my life who had had babies around the same time I did, and I don't know if they would have told me or not, but they weren't experiencing, or at least they weren't telling me these same things, and so I kind of felt stupid. I like to think of myself as a strong-willed person and very independent person, and that I can take care of myself and that I can push through pain, I can push through mental blocks, and I feel like I've worked really hard in my life to be able to do a lot, and I've done that in a lot of situations. And so coming home from the hospital, experiencing such a trauma that I did, and then having such an emotional response to it made me feel so weak, on top of feeling physically weak because people literally had to help me get up and out of a chair. They had to bring me food, make sure I was taking medicine. I was already feeling physically weak. It was almost embarrassing to feel emotionally weak and mentally weak. But I was weak. It wasn't because of me not being strong, but it was literally because of the hormones and things that were racing around in my body, and my body trying to get back to a normal state if it could. And so if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, maybe something you can relate to me about or something that's completely different, don't be embarrassed. I just am like so mad at myself for being embarrassed. I'm so mad at myself for I was mad at myself too. It was like, why can't I push through this? Why am I not tough enough? Like, why can't I handle this? Like, why can't I control it? Like, those were the thoughts that I was having, which then of course I would begin to obsess over. Like, it was just a rapid cycle. To be honest, this is a very vulnerable topic to talk about and to post on the internet, but I feel so strongly that if you're going through this, you please just talk to someone. And maybe this is the safest place for you is in the comment section. Like this, I want to be an encouraging environment for parents and for mothers. And if there is someone out there, you're just embarrassed to talk about it, you feel weak, you feel alone, like you are not. I've been there. Literally, post a comment, I will reply back to you. This is so important to build a community around this. But outside of like talking to some stranger on the internet you don't know, I really would encourage you to talk through all of these feelings and emotions with someone, ideally in your home, but someone super close in your life. Now, like I mentioned, I'm still struggling with the anxiety a little bit today, but I definitely overcame baby blues. I don't know if you can grow out of them. It didn't go past 6 weeks for me, the baby blues. I think I was just sad. I I had a lot to mourn with my delivery. There was a lot of stuff that I wanted to happen and imagined happening that just didn't. I didn't have a birth plan per se. I just dreamt of special moments that didn't get to happen because I had an emergency C-section. And so there's a part of the process where I had to mourn that. My daughter was not able to breastfeed for so many different reasons that I'm not going to go into. She wasn't able to breastfeed, and so I had to mourn that because it was something I was super looking forward to. So I think I had a lot of unmet expectations that I had to mourn and I had to be sad about, and because of those it led to me being in a little bit sadder of a place for about 6 weeks, and I did experience baby blues, which is common, most women do anyways. But the biggest thing that got me out of those moments was honestly talking with Drew. I was talking with my husband. When you live in isolation and when you live in the thoughts in your head, you can think anything's true, you can think anything is a reality. And when I would begin to vocalize things that I was thinking or things that I was feeling, it immediately resonated with me, like that's an anxious thought, or hey, that's like actually not reality, just by literally saying it out loud. Not only saying it out loud, but saying it to someone that I felt safe with, and I knew that Drew wasn't judging me and that he loved me. And I actually only really started telling him these things when he sat me down and was like, hey, so I googled and there's this thing called baby blues, have you heard of them? I just remember sitting there thinking in my head, I cannot believe he's about to tell me I have baby blues. But then I thought, I am so grateful that my husband would bring this up, because that's how much he cares about me, and he's so worried about me and didn't know what to do that he had to Google and find out, how can I help my wife? So I had to have a perspective change, right? If you're in that place, talk with your husband about it. If you are struggling, talk with your spouse, be vulnerable to them. And here's the deal, it's like that's a beautiful thing about being married. And if you're not married and you're having a child, talk with a really good friend and make sure that you're opening up with them. But I'm just grateful for Drew. I'm grateful that he came to me. So the biggest thing that really helped me was just talking to him about it, getting my ideas out into the open. I'm sure counselors probably have some more, better things they can help suggest. So if you really feel like you need to talk to a counselor about it, I would totally encourage that. But once I really started talking to Drew, I really felt like I was able to get a hold on my thoughts and really just change like my thought pattern. But outside of my thought life, I started to implement some things practically, physically, that would help me feel better. Psychology shows us how you think determines how you feel, determines how you behave. And so I needed to kind of reorient that whole process. If my thought life was going crazy, I needed to behaviorally do things that would help that cycle, so then I would think better about myself and think better about situations. So I really had to start prioritizing myself. One of the best things that I did every single day was take a shower. I just needed 5-15 minutes just to be by myself and just to not hear anything, not have to do anything, and just to literally just be. Not only that, but taking a shower forced me to get out of my pajamas. It forced me to get dressed, even if it was into something cozy like this, but it forced me to get ready for the day. I felt clean, I smelled good, and I felt better. So how I think determines how I feel, determines how I behave. So I started to feel better, so I was going to behave better, which would change my thoughts. I also started to get out of the house just once a day. Even if it was sometimes just to drive, to go through a drive-through, literally just drive around a lake. We have a lot of lakes here in my town, or a lot of the times we would end up going to Target. But I just needed to get out of the house once a day to change up my environment, change up what I was looking at, and just to feel the sunshine on my skin. And lastly, I really do think this is a huge factor into my healing, was that I really prioritized worship and prayer. So if I was alone, or in the late night pumps or late night feeds, if I felt alone or had an anxious thought, I just would give that over to God. I would pray to Him. I would listen to worship music. I would read some of my Bible. I don't know what your religious beliefs are, but I believe in God, and I have never felt more comforted in those moments or felt seen in those moments than I went to Him when I was really struggling. So don't be afraid to ask for help. You're not weak. You are so strong. You can do this. You can overcome. This is not the rest of your life. I'm only 6 months postpartum, and I'm here to tell you this is not the rest of your life. There's so much sunshine and so much joy coming right around the corner, and I promise what you're feeling right now is fleeting, it is temporary, it will go away. If you're really struggling, if you're having any sort of suicidal thoughts, please call your doctor, talk with your doctor, call a therapist, call a counselor, call a friend, call someone, let them into your life and let them help you. So thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.